Baton Rouge welcomed the fall with a cool breeze driving fallen magnolia leaves through the streets. Wendy Kennedy scrutinized her reflection in the mirror of the spacious dressing room. An impeccable ivory suit emphasized her slender figure, and pearl earrings added sophistication to her image. Another meeting of the board of directors required a perfect appearance. In the kitchen, plates were clattering as Anna, the housekeeper, prepared breakfast for Thomas. The boy loved pancakes with maple syrup, and the ritual had become an integral part of their morning. Wendy came down the stairs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped her with a pleasant warmth. "Mom, look, I solved all the math problems." Thomas held out a notebook to her, written in neat, childish handwriting. His blue eyes, an exact copy of his father's, shone with pride. Wendy stroked her son's blonde hair. "Good boy. Daddy will be happy to know you're doing so well." She carefully hid the bitterness in her voice. Eric had been spending less and less time with his family lately. Anna set a cup of coffee and avocado toast in front of her. Wendy nodded gratefully. The older woman had learned to guess her host's desires without fail in her 5 years of working in their home. "Mrs. Kennedy, Mr. Eric asked me to tell you he'll be back late. He has an important meeting," Anna said in a casual tone, but Wendy caught a shadow of concern in her gaze. Another meeting, the fourth in a week. Wendy took a sip of coffee, trying to suppress the unpleasant feeling in her chest. Her experience as a corporate lawyer told her something didn't add up in this picture. "Tell Mrs. Schaefer I'll expect her by 5, Wendy rose from the table. Martha, her longtime friend and private investigator, was supposed to stop by, ostensibly for a cup of tea. The driver was already waiting on the porch. The black Mercedes joined the morning traffic heading into the downtown business district. Wendy was reviewing the documents for the upcoming meeting when the phone vibrated. A message from Ronald Pierce, CFO. "Need to talk. Important." Ronald was waiting for her in the lobby of the business center. His usually immaculate suit looked rumpled and a strange expression froze on his face. "Wendy, there's a conversation to be had. Not here." He looked around nervously. They went up to her office on the 23rd floor. The panoramic windows offered a view of the city drowning in an autumn haze. Wendy lowered herself into a leather chair, gesturing for Ronald to sit down. "I should warn you. Eric, he's up to a dangerous game. The test could start at any moment." Ronald blotted his forehead with his handkerchief. "What kind of testing?" Wendy pitched forward. "Financial, paperwork. It's not all clean. I tried to stop him, but he won't listen. And now this girl from analytics?" he faltered, as if he'd said too much. Wendy felt her fingers grow cold. "What girl?" "Carla Ross. She showed up 3 months ago. Eric insisted on appointing her." Ronald avoided looking her in the eye. There was a knock on the door, the secretary reminding the meeting to begin. Wendy stood up, squaring her shoulders. Outwardly she remained calm, but inwardly she clenched with a premonition of trouble. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Wendy automatically answered questions, commented on documents, but her thoughts were far away. She thought back to the last few months, the late calls, the business trips, her husband's aloofness, his new cologne. After the meeting, she canceled all appointments and drove to Martha's office. Her friend met her in a small office littered with file folders. "Tell me about it." Martha slid a cup of herbal tea toward her. Wendy outlined the conversation with Ronald. Martha listened, making notes in her notebook. "I'm going to look into this Carla Ross, and the company's financial operations too." She slammed the notebook shut. "But you need to be prepared that the truth may not be pleasant." In the evening, the house greeted her with an unaccustomed silence. Thomas was already asleep. Anna had left dinner in the oven. Wendy went upstairs to the bedroom, unbuttoning her pearl necklace as she went, a gift from Eric for their 10th wedding anniversary. In the bathroom, she noticed a new bottle of men's perfume. the same unfamiliar scent she'd picked up on her husband's shirts. The label read, "From K," in elegant, feminine handwriting. Eric's phone had been ringing off the hook all evening. He answered in short sentences, going into the other room. There was an unfamiliar glint in his eyes and a strange smile on his lips. Wendy lay sleepless, listening to his breathing. 15 years of marriage, a house in an upscale neighborhood, a successful career, a son they were both proud of. Everything seemed so right, so secure. This morning she found a bill from the Red Rose restaurant in his jacket pocket for 2 people, dated yesterday. The waiter's handwriting seemed familiar, the same as on the bottle of perfume. Wendy folded the bill and stashed it in her purse. Martha must know about this. The puzzle was beginning to take shape, and the picture was not a pleasant one. She'd run into her in the office, Carla Ross, a tall blonde in a red dress too, revealing for the company's business style. Their gazes met. Something akin to defiance flashed in Carla's eyes. "Mrs. Kennedy, it's a pleasure to meet you." Her voice was honeyed, husky. "Your husband has told me a lot about you." Wendy nodded, maintaining a professional smile. "Only good things, I hope." "Oh, of course. Mr. Kennedy is an excellent leader," Carla stammered a little, but quickly pulled herself together. That evening, Wendy sat in her office for a long time, going through family photos. She and Eric looked happy in them. Thomas's birth, a vacation to the coast, a dinner party to celebrate his promotion. When had things started to change? At what point had she missed the first signs? The phone vibrated, a message from Martha. "Got some information. Meet me tomorrow." Wendy set the photos aside. She had always prided herself on her ability to analyze facts and make good decisions. Those skills could come in handy now more than ever. Martha was waiting in a small cafe on the outskirts of town. She had chosen the place for a reason. People from their circle rarely came here. Wendy took a seat at a table in the far corner, where the dim light gave a sense of privacy. "Here's what I found." Martha pulled out a thin folder. "Carla Ross, 29 years old, 3 marriages, all ended in divorce. Each husband a wealthy man older than her. Last divorce was 6 months ago." Wendy flipped through the paperwork. Photographs, bank statements, copies of lawsuits. The predator's story was emerging with frightening clarity. "That's not all," Martha lowered her voice. "Your husband's financial transactions over the last 3 months, large transfers, offshore accounts. And this," she held out the photos. Eric and Carla were leaving the restaurant, his arm around her waist, an intimate tilt of his head. The next shot was of them getting into his car. The date is 2 weeks ago. "Should I keep watching?" Martha eyed her friend carefully. Wendy folded the documents. Yes, especially interested in the company's financial transactions. In the evening, she tried to work in her home office, but her thoughts kept returning to the photographs she had seen. There was a family photo on the desk, the 3 of them against the lake, Thomas between them, happy and carefree. The ringing of the phone interrupted her musings. Eric said he was running late, an important dinner with potential investors. His voice sounded unusually enthusiastic. Anna brought tea and looked worriedly at the untouched papers. "Perhaps you should rest, Mrs. Kennedy." "Thank you, Anna. I'll work some more." Wendy smiled gratefully. The housekeeper's devotion touched her. Thomas was already asleep when Wendy peeked into the nursery. His favorite teddy bear was lying on the floor, a 5th birthday present from his father. She picked up the toy, adjusted the blanket. The phone rang again. Ronald Pierce. "Wendy, there's a special board meeting tomorrow." Eric insisted. "He's up to something." In the morning, the office buzzed like an alarmed beehive. Secretaries scurried between offices. Tense meetings were going on in the meeting rooms. Wendy saw Carla slip out of Eric's office, hurriedly fixing her hair. The meeting started at 10 sharp. Eric looked confident, even triumphant. He presented the company's restructuring project, new appointments, redistribution of authority. And I recommend Carla Ross for the position of head of analytics. His eyes sparkled when he said her name. Wendy watched the reactions of those present. Ronald turned pale. The rest of the board members looked over at each other. Carla sat with a perfectly straight back, a slight smile playing on her lips. After the meeting, Ronald intercepted Wendy in the hallway. "This is crazy. She's underqualified. And those financial reports." "What reports?" Wendy tensed. "The data on the latest transactions. Something doesn't add up. I need time to check." He looked around nervously. That evening, Eric announced at dinner, "We're going to a restaurant on Saturday. I want Thomas to meet someone." "Who?" Wendy felt her fingers go ice cold. "You'll see," he smiled. The same smile he'd used at the board meeting. On Saturday, Eric picked up Thomas. Wendy watched them get into the car. Her son waved at her. He was glad to spend time with his father. 2 hours later, Thomas returned, pale, confused. Anna tried to offer him dinner, but he silently went up to his room. Wendy found him sitting on his bed. The teddy bear lay on the floor, this time upside down. "What's wrong, honey?" She crouched down next to him. "Daddy said," Thomas's voice shook, "he said I'm going to have a new mommy now, Carla. She wore a red dress and laughed the whole time." Wendy hugged her son, feeling his shoulders shudder with silent sobs. One thought pulsed in her head. They dared to do this to her child. She lay awake at night, sitting in her office. On the computer screen, the documents Martha had sent opened. Carla Ross's story could be traced through lawsuits and police reports. Skillful manipulation, financial fraud, blackmail. The phone flashed a message from Ronald. "Found the evidence. Meet me in the morning." Eric returned past midnight. He smelled of alcohol and familiar perfume. He tried to hug Wendy, but she pulled away. "How could you?" Her voice sounded quiet, but you could hear the metal in it. "What do you mean?" He grinned drunkenly. "Oh, you already know. Well, yeah, I've decided to change things. Carla understands me. She's young, ambitious." "You used our son." Wendy felt a cold rage rising inside. "Thomas needs to get used to it. I'm filing for divorce." He pulled a crumpled envelope from his pocket. "All the terms are here. I'll be generous if you don't make trouble." Wendy took the envelope without opening it. "You'll regret this." "Don't threaten me." His face contorted. "I've thought this through. Carla is already pregnant. We'll be married in a month." In the morning, Wendy called her personal attorney, then dialed Martha's number. "Activate Plan B. We're starting right now." At the office, the first thing she did was meet Ronald. He looked haggard but determined. "Here are the documents." Eric was falsifying financial statements, moving money out through shell companies, and Carla was helping him. "Send copies to the IRS and SEC." Wendy looked over the papers. "Anonymously, through your attorney." By the end of the day, a scandal had erupted. Tax inspectors sealed offices. Security officers seized documents. Eric was floundering between floors trying to explain things. Carla had disappeared. Her desk was empty, her computer locked. Only an empty spot remained in the parking lot where her red car was usually parked. That evening, Wendy sat with Thomas in his room. He was cradling his teddy bear, looking calm for the first time that day. "It's going to be okay," she stroked his head. "I promise." There was an oppressive silence in Wendy's house. Anna was quietly rearranging the dishes in the kitchen, trying not to disturb this fragile peace. Wendy sat in her study, spreading out before her the papers Ronald had collected. Each paper, each statement added up to a picture of an elaborate betrayal. From the ajar window came the rustle of fall leaves. Above the desk hung a painting, a gift from my father for graduating from law school. "Justice is balance," he liked to say. Now those words took on a new meaning. A phone call broke the silence. "Martha, Have you seen the morning news yet? Wendy turned on her laptop. The headlines were rife with reports of a financial scandal at the company. The stock had plummeted, and the board of directors was going into an emergency meeting. This is just the beginning, Martha was quiet. There's something else. Carla left a mark in Miami. 3 years ago, she was involved in a similar story. The company went bankrupt. The director went to jail for fraud. Send me all the materials, Wendy made a note in her notebook. And check Eric's accounts for the last year. Every transfer, every transaction. There was a quiet knock on the office door. Thomas stood on the threshold, clutching his school backpack to his chest. Mom, I don't want to go to school today. Wendy walked over to her son, kneeling down in front of him. Why? Jim said his dad talked about our family on the phone. Something bad about Dad. His lips trembled. Listen. Wendy took him by the shoulders. Sometimes adults make mistakes, but it's not your fault. It's not your fault at all. At school, Wendy met her class teacher, Miss Parker. The young teacher looked worried. Thomas is withdrawn. He sits alone at recess, doesn't participate in common games. I'll make an appointment for him to see a child psychologist. Wendy pulled out Dr. Henderson's card that Martha had recommended. On her way out of the school, she ran into Jim's mother, Sarah Mitchell. She averted her eyes, mumbled something inaudible, and hurried away. The news traveled fast. The office was in chaos. Investigators were interviewing employees. Auditors were reviewing records. Ronald looked drained but held firm. They found offshore accounts. He closed the office door. Eric's been withdrawing company money for the last 6 months. Large sums. And everywhere there's a traceable connection to the firms Carla was advising. What about the pregnancy? Wendy did her best to keep her voice steady. Most likely a bluff. She's used this trick before. Ronald held out a folder to her. Here's the story of her last divorce. It also included a pregnancy that miraculously terminated after she received a large sum of money. In the evening, Carla's mother, Judith Ross, called. The older woman cried, "I'm sorry. I should have warned you. Carla, she's always been like this. Back in high school, she learned how to manipulate people. I tried to stop her, but she—" Wendy wrote down Judith's cell phone number. Her mother's testimony could be useful in court. At night, she went through old photos on her laptop. The wedding, the honeymoon, Thomas's first steps. Eric had smiled the same way in all the pictures, with the right corner of his lips slightly raised. Now she saw the falseness in that smile. In the morning came a text from Eric. "We need to talk. I'll explain everything." The meeting was scheduled at the same restaurant where he'd had dinner with Carla. Eric looked crumpled, shadows under his eyes. "Wendy, let's settle this peacefully." He tried to take her hand. "I'll pay whatever alimony I can. I'll give up the house. Just don't try to destroy me." "Destroy you?" She allowed herself a slight chuckle. "You've destroyed everything yourself, with every lie, every betrayal." "It was a mistake." He ran a hand over his face. "Carla, she bewitched me, promised to fix my investor problems, and then she started blackmailing me. And that's why you introduced her to our son as the new mom?" Wendy rose from the table. "Goodbye, Eric. I'll see you in court." Waiting for her at home was news from Martha. "Found another of Carla's victims, ready to testify, and he has tapes of their conversations." Wendy opened the file with the recordings. Carla's voice sounded smug. "Honey, it's just business. Nothing personal. Pay up and we'll part ways peacefully." The next day, Ronald brought the results of the internal investigation. The scheme turned out to be elegant. The money was conducted through a chain of shell companies. Each transaction looked legitimate. "But here's where they made a mistake," he pointed to the dates. Carla incorporated the company before she met Eric. She planned it in advance. Wendy studied the documents until late into the night. From the nursery came Thomas's quiet snoozing. Her son was finally starting to sleep normally. Dr. Henderson had said that was a good sign. The phone rang on the desk, an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice distorted by static. "Stop! I have dirt on your father. His career as a judge could end very ugly." "Hi, Carla," Wendy turned on the recording. "Thanks for calling. It'll come in handy for the blackmail case." Silence hung in the receiver, then there was a short beep. In the morning, Wendy met her father at his favorite coffee shop. The gray-haired man listened to his daughter with an impenetrable face. "So she's trying to push through me," he sipped his coffee. "Let her try it. In 40 years as a judge, I've seen her kind by the dozens." They're both puffed up. Wendy looked out the window at the rain-soaked streets. They thought they were smarter than everyone else. "You're like your mother," her father smiled. She never forgave betrayal either, and always knew how to wait for the right moment to strike. In the evening, Wendy gathered all the documents, financial statements, witness statements, tapes of conversations. The story of the betrayal was coming together into a clear picture. The phone rang again. This time Ronald. "Eric's trying to sell the stock urgently. He's taking money out of the country." "Let him try," Wendy smiled. "The IRS has already gotten all the paperwork. His accounts are frozen." A nightlight, a gift from his grandmother, burned in Thomas's bedroom, casting whimsical shadows on the walls. His son slept hugging a teddy bear. On the bedside table lay a drawing, a family, but now without the father figure. Wendy adjusted the blanket. Tomorrow was the beginning of a new phase in their lives, the first court hearing in the financial fraud case. The battle promised to be tough, but she was ready. The courtroom greeted Wendy with a chill and muffled voices. She took a seat next to the attorney, spreading out the papers in front of her. Eric sat across the aisle, avoiding looking in her direction. His new suit couldn't hide his drained face and red eyes. Judge Montgomery, a gray-haired woman with a sharp eye, was studying the case file. Wendy knew her reputation: principled, intransigent about financial shenanigans. "Your Honor," Eric's attorney rose first, "my client is willing to cooperate fully. All of the disputed transactions have a legitimate explanation." Wendy handed her attorney a folder of documents. "Take a look at the transactions through an offshore company called Blue Sapphire. Registration 2 weeks before the withdrawals started." Charts of money movement appeared on the screen. Clear arrows showed the path of millions through shell companies. Eric fidgeted in his seat, his lawyer hurriedly taking notes. After the meeting, Ronald waited in the hallway. "The IRS has started an audit of all the companies associated with Carla. They've uncovered an interesting pattern. She used the same scheme in 3 different states." "Send the data to my lawyer." Wendy checked her phone. A message from Martha. "Found her. Carla's in Miami, meeting with her ex-husband." That evening the doorbell rang. Judith Ross, Carla's mother, stood on the doorstep. Her wrinkled face expressed alarm. "I have to tell you the whole truth about how it all began." In the parlor, Anna served tea. Judith held the cup with trembling hands. "Carla was always special. At school she manipulated teachers, classmates. I tried to stop her, but she said the world is cruel, you have to take your own." "Tell me about her first husband." Wendy turned on the recorder. "Howard Payne, a banker. She met him at a charity event. 6 months later they were married, and another year later his bank went bankrupt. Carla managed to transfer the money into secret accounts." "Do you have proof?" "Letters. She wrote to me, bragging about her cleverness." Judith pulled out an envelope. "I saved them. Thought maybe someday she'd come to her senses." The next day, Wendy met with Howard Payne. The once successful banker now worked as a consultant for a small firm. "She's charming, isn't she?" He grinned bitterly. "Knows how to find an approach to everyone. I lost everything: reputation, money, friends. When I realized what was happening, it was too late." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Ashamed and useless. She'd thought of everything. Every document is perfectly clean." He was silent. But I kept a few things. The notes of our conversations, her notes in her day planner. It seemed paranoid then, but now there were new photos in Martha's office. Carla was meeting a strange man at an expensive Miami restaurant. His name is Alex Donovan. Martha held out the file. Owner of an investment company. Divorced, rich, single, perfect target. She wastes no time. Wendy studied the photos. Send the information to his security team, anonymously. Thomas was waiting for her at home with a new drawing. Mom, look, that's you and me in the park, and that's Dr. Henderson. She's a good one. It's very pretty. Wendy hugged her son. The sessions with the psychologist were bringing results. He started drawing again, smiling. The phone rang late at night. Ronald. Eric is trying to negotiate with the investigation. He's offering to turn Carla in exchange for a reduced sentence. Predictable. Wendy grinned. He's always looking for the easy way out. The morning paper lay on the table. A financial scandal occupied the front page. The company's stock had plummeted. Investors were demanding an explanation. A new message from Martha. Check your mail. I found the blue sapphire transaction files. There's something interesting in there. Wendy opened the files. The scheme was more complicated than they thought. Carla had created a network of companies, each of which looked legit. But together they formed the perfect mechanism for money laundering. She used the same firms in the Payne case. Ronald pointed to the dates. Just changed the names and registered in different states. An email from Alex Donovan arrived in the morning. Thanks for the heads up. I checked the facts. You have saved my fortune and reputation. The court hearing on the merits of the case began. Eric looked lost, his attorney trying to argue every document. Look at these signatures, Wendy's attorney pointed to the screen. Mr. Kennedy personally approved every transaction, every transfer of funds. Judge Montgomery scrutinized the documents. Mr. Kennedy, do you understand the seriousness of the charges? Your Honor, I have been misled, Eric's voice shook. Carla Ross presented these transactions as legitimate optimization. Optimization? The judge raised an eyebrow. You call withdrawing millions through offshore transactions optimization? During a break, Ronald showed the new documents. Look what's interesting. A week before the first transaction, Carla met with a man from the IRS, a former classmate. She planned ahead, Wendy made a note, a cover in case of an audit. That evening, Sarah Mitchell, Jim's mother, called. Wendy, I'm sorry for the way I acted. I didn't know the whole truth. Now Jim has told me how hard it is for Thomas at school. Kids always have it harder. Wendy looked at the picture of her son on the table. They don't understand grown-up games. A desk lamp burned in the father's office. The old judge studied the case file. She's talented, this Carla. Every move is thought out, every detail in place. But there's one mistake. What is it? Pride. He tapped his finger on the papers. She's confident in her invulnerability. Such people are always caught by self-confidence. The news brought an urgent message. The company's stock had plummeted to an all-time low. The board of directors was going into an emergency meeting. Wendy's phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. Are you happy? Ruined everything we've spent years building? Carla's voice sounded hysterical. We? You showed up 3 months ago, and you ruined it all yourself, with your greed. This isn't over. A chuckle came through the receiver. I still have some trump cards left. Wendy put the phone down. On the desk were new documents from Martha, a history of Carla's banking transactions over the past 5 years. Each page told a story of elaborate deception. In the nursery, Thomas was already asleep. His new drawings hung on the wall, bright, cheerful. Dr. Henderson said it was a good sign. The child was dealing with the trauma. Wendy sat down at the computer. It was going to be a long night ahead. She needed to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. The story of betrayal was coming to a close, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. Miami greeted Wendy with humid heat and bright sunshine. She checked into a small hotel near the business center, where, according to Martha, Carla had spent the last 2 weeks. The Blue Wave restaurant was on the top floor of a modern building. Wendy took a table by the window which overlooked the coast. The waiter brought a menu and a glass of ice water. "Mrs. Kennedy?" A tall man in an expensive suit approached the table. "Alex Donovan. Thank you for seeing me." He looked younger than his 50s, trim, with a slight gray on his temples. His eyes read a sharp business mind. "Carla contacted me a month ago." Alex sipped his water. "Perfect cover story, a young widow looking for investment in a startup. The project looked promising." "But you suspected something?" "After your warning, I started digging. Found some interesting connections to offshore companies. Same pattern as the Payne case." The waiter brought a folder of documents. Donovan's security team had done a thorough job. Each page added new details to Carla's portrait. "Take a look at this." Alex pointed to the dates. "The week before we met, she registered 3 new companies. Classic withdrawal preparation." In the hotel lobby, Wendy met Martha. Her friend looked pleased. Found her old apartment. Concierge was chatty, especially when he saw the private investigator's badge. They went up to the 12th floor of an old building in a respectable neighborhood. The apartment was empty, but kept traces of her former life. "This is where she lived with her first husband." Martha opened a closet door. "Look what I found." On the top shelf was an old leather-bound day planner. Carla's neat handwriting filled the pages. Plans, notes, calculations. "March 23rd, Wendy read the entries. "The plan is ready. Howard doesn't suspect. I need to prepare the paperwork to incorporate the company." The phone rang. "Ronald. We have a problem. Eric's trying to negotiate with the IRS. He's offering information on other schemes." "Let him try," Wendy grinned. "We already have everything we need." They met Carla's former co-worker, Melissa Frost, at the cafe across the street. The thin, middle-aged woman was nervously swirling a cup of cold coffee. "I worked with her at Payne's Bank," Melissa said quietly. "She had a way of charming people. Howard looked up to her like a goddess, and she was methodically plotting his downfall." "Tell me more about it." "First, the little things. Access to databases, copies of important documents. Then the introductions to the right people. She was building a network of connections, preparing escape routes." That evening in her hotel room, Wendy studied the new materials. Every document, every piece of evidence added to the portrait of the woman who had destroyed her family. A call from Thomas interrupted her work. "Mom, guess what? I got an A in history. Dr. Henderson said I did great." "I'm proud of you, honey," Wendy smiled. Her son's voice sounded livelier, more confident. A new message from Martha. "Check the mail. Found an interesting trail. A private school in New Orleans." The archives at St. Mary's kept the story of young Carla Ross, an honors student, school board president, a teacher's favorite. "She always stood out," the elderly nun pored over old photos. "Smart, ambitious. But there was a certain coldness, as if everyone around her were just tools to accomplish a goal." An interesting entry in the file revealed an expulsion from the school board for manipulating charitable funds. The case was hushed up, but the trail remained. The phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Kennedy? This is Patrick Green, Howard Payne's former partner. We need to meet." The waterfront restaurant was nearly empty. An elderly man in an austere suit waited at a far table. "I've kept quiet all these years," he pulled out a tattered folder. "Thought it was none of my business. But when I heard about this new scam..." The documents told the story of a carefully planned deception. Carla had been preparing for the collapse of Payne's Bank long before the wedding. "This one is particularly interesting." Patrick pointed to the list of transactions. "Same schemes, same shell companies. She even used similar names." A message from the lawyer was waiting at the hotel. Eric has agreed to a plea deal, ready to testify against Carla. Wendy dialed Ronald's number. Check every document he provides, every signature, every date. Already working on it, Ronald sounded tired in his voice. Looks like he's decided to save his own skin. In the morning came a letter from Judith Ross. Attached to the letter were old photos, young Carla at her high school graduation, her first job at the bank, her wedding to Howard. She was different, Judith wrote, before she realized she could use people. That beauty and intelligence were the perfect weapons. There was a knock on the door of the suite. The hallway attendant brought an envelope. Inside was a picture of Carla with Eric in a restaurant, the very night she'd met Thomas. On the back it read, "You think you've won? This is just the beginning. I have something you care about." Wendy dialed Anna's number. "How is Thomas?" "He's fine, Mrs. Kennedy." The housekeeper's voice sounded calm. "He's in his room doing his homework. Dr. Henderson came in this morning." Martha sent new data, bank transfers, surveillance tapes. Carla was preparing a new operation, now with Donovan's money. "She's getting careless," Martha observed. "Too sure of herself. That's her weak spot." In the evening, her father called. "Judge Montgomery has reviewed the new materials. It looks like the case is taking a serious turn." "How serious?" "A federal investigation. It's not just divorce and corporate fraud anymore. They're digging into an organized crime scheme." In the room, Wendy laid out all the documents, all the evidence. Carla Ross's story was coming together like a mosaic, each piece in its place. The phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Tell Mrs. Kennedy, I know something that might interest her. Meet me tomorrow at noon, Laguna Cafe." Wendy showed the message to Martha. "Sounds like a trap," her friend frowned, "but we can use it." They worked the plan down to the last detail. Tomorrow could be the decisive day in this story. Before going to bed, Wendy called Thomas. "How are you, honey?" "Fine, Mom. You know, I drew a new picture today. Dr. Henderson said I don't draw sad things anymore." "That's good, sunshine. Very good." The Laguna Cafe was located in a quiet corner of Miami, away from the tourist trails. Wendy chose a table by the window that overlooked the entire room and the exit. Martha took a position in the car across the street, ready to step in at any moment. At exactly noon, the door opened and a young woman in a strict business suit walked in. She looked around and walked confidently toward Wendy's table. "My name is Rachel Porter." She took a seat, placing a thin folder on the table. "I used to work with Carla at Donovan's investment firm." "Why did you decide to meet with me?" "Because I was tired of being an accessory." Rachel opened the folder. "Here are the documents on how she prepared the scam with Donovan's money. The same scheme she used with your husband." Wendy studied the papers. Each page added new details to the picture of the crime, carefully thought out, calibrated to the last detail. "She made me help," Rachel's voice shook. "First the little things, tweaking the report, holding up the paperwork. Then the bigger ones, forged signatures, contracts." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "She keeps dirt on everyone. She has information that could destroy my career." A message from Martha came through on Wendy's phone. "Checked on her. Story checks out. Can be trusted." Rachel pulled out a thumb drive. "Here's email correspondence, conversation notes. She thought she controlled everything, but I was running my own game too." Back at the hotel, Wendy was reviewing the materials she had received. Carla was running several operations in parallel. Eric's company was just one of the targets. The phone rang. Ronald. "The board of directors is meeting in emergency session. The shareholders are demanding immediate action." Tension reigned in the boardroom. Board members were leafing through internal audit reports. Charts of the stock plummeting were displayed on the screen. "Gentlemen," the chairman of the board rose, "the situation is critical. The reputational losses are enormous. We need decisive action." Eric sat pale, with drops of sweat on his forehead. His lawyer was hurriedly jotting something down in a notebook. "Mr. Kennedy," the chairman's voice sounded dry. "Will you explain to the board how these transactions could have gone through without due diligence?" I trusted the finance department." Eric blotted his forehead with a handkerchief. "Carla Ross provided all the necessary documents." "Which turned out to be false." The chairman tapped a folder on the table. "So were her references. So was her record." Wendy handed the secretary the new documents. "Look at the dates of incorporation of the offshore companies. It was all planned in advance." Charts of money flow appeared on the screen, a complex web of transactions masking withdrawals. "This is a disaster," one of the directors shook his head. "The shareholders are demanding blood." Wendy spent a break in the meeting talking to Ronald. He looked haggard but determined. "The IRS has started a full-scale audit. They've found connections to other companies." "Which ones?" "Remember Payne's Bank? Some of the money went through the same offshore companies. Carla was using proven schemes." The phone rang again. "Martha." "There's news. Carla's trying to sell real estate in Miami. Looks like she's getting ready to flee." After the break, the atmosphere in the room became even more tense. The chairman announced the board's decision. "Mr. Kennedy, you are suspended pending an investigation. All of your credentials are suspended." Eric jumped up. "You can't. I have a contract." "We can," the chairman was adamant. "Paragraph 17. Gross breaches of fiduciary duty. Security will escort you to the exit." In the hallway, Eric tried to talk to Wendy. "Look, we can fix this. I'll testify against Carla." Too late, she turned away. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the trust of the shareholders, the employees, and most importantly, you betrayed our son." In the evening, investigators came to the office. They sealed documents, seized computers. Ronald helped them by pointing to key files. "Look at this." He opened a folder of contracts. Every document is signed retroactively. They gave the illusion of legitimacy. Wendy called home. Thomas was doing his homework under Anna's supervision. His voice sounded calmer. "Mom, when are you coming back? Dr. Henderson said I'm doing well." "Soon, honey. Pretty soon." News of Eric Kennedy's fall filled the business press. The company's stock continued to fall, and investors demanded an explanation. Martha sent new pictures of Carla getting into a cab at the Miami airport. She bought a ticket to Brazil, but I doubt that's her real goal. At the hotel, Wendy received another guest, a former Payne's Bank employee. He brought documents proving the connection between Carla's old and new scams. She never changed her handwriting. The elderly financier shook his head. Same schemes, same offshore. Only the company names changed. The phone rang late at night. "Ronald. Eric's trying to fly out of the country. Customs have detained him. His passport is on the exit restriction list." "How predictable," Wendy grinned. "He's always running from trouble." In the morning came a message from Rachel Porter. "Checked the mail. Found more documents. Carla was planning a scam with Donovan's company. Same scheme, same perpetrators." In the hotel hallway, Wendy ran into a reporter from a financial publication. "Mrs. Kennedy, comment on your husband's suspension." "No comment." She walked past. Let the story unfold on its own. Chaos reigned in the company's office. Employees were packing up their belongings. Security was checking every person leaving. Interim management has been turned over to a crisis manager. Ronald led Wendy into a conference room. A full audit of all operations for the last 3 years is beginning. A familiar face flashed on the TV screen. Howard Payne was being interviewed. "I warned about her methods, but no one wanted to listen." In the evening, Judith Ross called. "Carla contacted me, asked for money. I said no, for the first time in my life." "How did she react?" "Threatened, like she always does. But there was panic in her voice. She's losing control. In the hotel room, Wendy laid out all the paperwork, all the evidence. The story was coming to a close, but she knew the hardest part was ahead. Her phone vibrated, a message from Carla. "You ruined my plans. Now I'm going to ruin your life. I have dirt on your father." Wendy smiled. Old threats, old methods. Carla was really losing her grip. There was a knock at the door. A messenger brought an envelope from Martha. "Found her hideout. We start the operation tomorrow." Dawn colored the Miami sky a soft pink. Wendy was watching the sunrise from the hotel balcony when a message arrived from Martha. Subject located, country home an hour outside of town. The photos showed a secluded villa hidden behind a high fence. A luxurious garden, swimming pool, private jetty, the perfect hideaway for those who don't want to be found. "The house is registered to a shell company," Martha sent a statement from the real estate registry. "Same scheme as Payne's Real Estate." In the hotel lobby, Wendy met with an FBI agent, Michael Brown. The tall African-American man in an impeccable suit exuded calm confidence. "We've been following Miss Ross's activities for a long time." He spread the documents on the desk. "Your investigation has provided the missing links. What are you most interested in?" "Connections to international financial structures, offshore accounts, shell companies. It's not just corporate fraud anymore." The audit continued at the company's offices. Ronald worked with the investigators, giving access to documents. His face expressed a strange tension. "Take a look at this." He held out a folder to Wendy. "Transfers through a Singapore bank. All clean at first glance, but... The dates don't add up. The transactions took place before the accounts were officially opened." The phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Your friend Ronald is not as easy as he looks. Check his signatures on the March documents." Wendy opened the archive. Indeed, Ronald's signature was on key contracts. He had known about the shenanigans from the beginning. A heavy silence hung in the CFO's office. Ronald sat with his head down. "She was blackmailing me. She had documents about my past mistakes." "And that's why you betrayed the company? Betrayed my trust?" "I thought I could control everything, minimize the damage." His voice shook. "But she turned out to be trickier." Agent Brown listened intently to Ronald's confession. "That changes the picture. We need all the details of your involvement." In the hallway, Wendy ran into the chairman of the board of directors. His usually confident look was replaced by concern. "The situation is worse than we thought. The auditors have found some more suspicious schemes." "How serious?" "An international scandal. The interests of major investors from Europe and Asia are affected." Marta sent new data, the villa's security footage. Carla hadn't been there in days, but a courier with documents arrived regularly. "We need to check the courier service." Wendy dialed Agent Brown's number. "There might be a trace there." At the courier company's office, they were met by the manager, a young man in a uniform shirt. "Yes, these deliveries are special. Always the same courier, special security instructions." "Who pays for the services?" "A company called Blue Sapphire Consulting. All the invoices go through their accounting department." Wendy glanced over at Agent Brown. The same company had been implicated in the money withdrawal schemes. The phone rang. "Howard Payne. Turn on the news. They found the body." The TV screen flashed images of a police cordon. A yacht had been found in the bay with the body of an elderly man, Carla's former partner in one of the scams. "The official story is an accident." Payne's voice sounded strained, but he was going to testify against her. In the evening, Wendy's father arrived at the hotel. The old judge looked worried. "The situation is getting out of hand. We need to act faster." "What's wrong?" "A request has come in from the International Prosecutor's Office. It's going global." In the room, Wendy was sorting through new paperwork when a message came in from Rachel Porter. "She's in Panama. Saw her at the bank an hour ago." Martha immediately contacted her local colleagues. Cameras confirm. She was trying to access the safe deposit box. Agent Brown organized an emergency meeting. We have an arrest warrant, but we need to proceed with caution. She may destroy the documents. The phone rang again. Eric. His voice sounded broken. I'm ready to tell everything, every detail, every conversation. Why now? She tried to set me up, wanted me to take all the blame. At the IRS office, Eric testified. Page after page, he described the fraud scheme, the role of each participant. Carla planned the whole thing from the beginning. He held out a thumb drive. Here's her real plan. The company was just the first step. Wendy reviewed the files in the presence of the investigators. The scale of the scam was staggering. Dozens of companies, hundreds of millions of dollars, a network of enablers around the world. Ronald also decided to cooperate with the investigation. I kept copies of all the documents. I thought it would be my insurance. Insurance against what? From her. I've seen what's happened to people who've tried to stand up to her. Martha sent an urgent text. Carla has left the bank, heading to the airport. Agent Brown immediately contacted Panamanian authorities. Airports and ports are blocked. She will not leave. In the evening came a message from Judith Ross. Carla called. For the first time in years, she seemed scared. What did she say? Asked for help. Said she'd fix everything, but I don't believe her promises anymore. In the hotel room, Wendy received another visitor, a former system administrator for the company. He brought backups of the servers. Everything is here. Mail, documents, even deleted files. FBI technicians immediately began analyzing the data. Each file could contain important clues. The phone rang past midnight. Thomas. Mom, I saw Dad on TV. He looks sad. Yes, sweetie. Sometimes adults make mistakes and are sad about it. Dr. Henderson says it's okay to be sad. The important thing is to correct mistakes. In the morning, news came from Panama. Carla was trying to cross the border into Costa Rica. Local police detained her with a suitcase of documents and cash. Game over. Agent Brown showed the extradition warrant. Now the real investigation begins. Changes had begun at the company's office. The new crisis manager was reorganizing, rebuilding investor confidence. Ronald wrote his resignation letter. I don't deserve a second chance, but I want to help fix what I've ruined. Wendy looked out over the night city from the hotel balcony. The story was coming to an end, but the repercussions of these events would be felt for a long time to come. Her phone vibrated, a message from Martha. Get ready. The main interrogation starts tomorrow. Carla has spoken. The interrogation room of the federal building in Miami breathed a sterile coolness. Carla sat at her desk, her once flawless makeup smudged, her designer suit wrinkled. Across from her sat Agent Brown and the federal prosecutor. Miss Ross, tell us about your acquaintance with Eric Kennedy. The prosecutor switched on the recorder. Behind the tinted glass, Wendy watched the interrogation. Her attorney stood nearby, making notes in a notebook. It was a chance meeting. Carla's voice sounded hoarse. A corporate reception in New Orleans. He seemed like an easy target, narcissistic, ambitious, underestimated by his superiors. And you launched the operation? Not right away. First, I looked into his connections, his financial situation, his weaknesses, she grinned. Everyone has weaknesses. In the next room, Eric was testifying. His groomed appearance had been replaced by the rumpled weariness of a man who'd lost everything. She had a knack for approach, he rubbed his tie. First business advice, then hints of special opportunities, investments, connections, rapid growth. Martha brought in new documents, bank statements from Panama. The trail leads deeper. She was working with an international syndicate. Agent Brown unfolded a diagram on the screen. Look, The same group ran scams in 5 countries. Payne's Bank was just a rehearsal. That evening, an expanded investigative team met in the federal prosecutor's office. Folders of evidence lay on the table, the result of months of painstaking work. "We have enough for an indictment." The prosecutor tapped his pen on the table. "Fraud, money laundering, international financial fraud. And that's just the beginning." Agent Brown unfolded a new scheme. "Take a look at the connections to the European banks." Wendy's phone vibrated a message from Ronald. "I found more documents, ready to testify about the role of the board of directors." There was an oppressive silence in the courtroom. Judge Montgomery read out the list of charges. Each count sounded like a nail in the coffin of Eric's career. "Defendant, do you understand the seriousness of the charges?" "Yes, Your Honor." Eric's voice shook. "I fully admit my guilt and am willing to cooperate with the investigation." Carla was brought in under heavy guard. She kept a straight face, but there was no trace of her former arrogance. "Defendant, how do you feel about the charges against you?" "I plead not guilty." She lifted her chin. "It was a legitimate business strategy." In the evening, Wendy was on the phone with Thomas. "How are you doing, honey?" "Fine, Mom. Dr. Henderson said I've gotten stronger, and I'm not afraid to go to school anymore." Waiting in the hotel room was a letter from Judith Ross. "I owe you an apology. I created this monster by failing to stop my daughter in time." The morning papers were full of headlines about the biggest financial scandal of the year. Analysts were calculating losses. Experts were commenting. Martha brought the latest news. "Interpol has discovered Swiss bank accounts. The sums are huge." "In whose name?" "Shell companies. But the trail leads to Carla and her international partners." In the courtroom, the debate of the parties began. The prosecutor presented evidence. Thousands of pages of documents, taped conversations, witness statements. Eric looked broken. His confession had taken hours. Every detail, every step of the criminal scheme. Carla listened to his testimony with a stone face. Only her fingers nervously tugging at her handkerchief gave away her tension. That evening, Wendy's father called. "They're trying to cut a deal with the investigation. They're offering information on the bigger players." "That won't save them." Wendy looked out at the night city. "There's too much evidence." The verdict was read to the full house. Eric received 8 years in prison and a fine of several $1,000,000. Carla received a harsher sentence of 15 years in prison, forfeiture of property, and a ban on financial activity upon release. In the court corridor, Wendy ran into Ronald. Another haul, another sentence awaited him. The plea bargain had commuted his sentence. "I'm sorry," he lowered his eyes. "I should have stopped it sooner." Wendy got home late that night. Thomas was awake, waiting for her with a new drawing. "Look, Mom, I drew our new house. Without Daddy, but with you." Autumn in Baton Rouge was unusually warm. Wendy sat in the garden of her new home, watching Thomas play with the neighborhood children. His laughter, tinkling and sincere, seemed the best proof that life was slowly getting better. The morning paper lay on the table, another article about the aftermath of the financial scandal. The company was slowly recovering under a new manager. The stock was starting to rise. Investors were coming back. "Mom, look!" Thomas ran up with a clipboard. "I got an A on my presentation about sea creatures." Wendy hugged her son, inhaling the scent of his hair, fresh, childlike. Dr. Henderson had noted significant progress. The nightmares had stopped. The boy was sociable again. A phone call interrupted the idyllic picture. "Martha, turn on the news. Carla is giving her first interview from prison." The gaunt face of the once brilliant con artist appeared on the screen. Prison robes replaced designer outfits. The haughty glint in her eyes was gone. "I don't consider myself a criminal." Her voice sounded muffled. "It was a business, just business that got out of hand." In the evening, her father arrived. The old judge looked pleased. The Supreme Court has rejected the appeal. The verdict stands. What about the international investigation? The whole network has been uncovered. Arrests were made in 7 countries. Carla was just the tip of the iceberg. In her office, Wendy was sorting through paperwork, the last formalities of the divorce proceedings. The lawyer had sent a draft of the custody agreement for Thomas. Eric waives all rights? She reread the text. Yes, the attorney's voice in the receiver sounded confident. His new lawyer says it's part of the defense strategy. Show remorse, drop the claims. A letter arrived from the prison. Eric asked for a meeting. Wendy stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. I owe you an explanation, he wrote. I owe you an apology, not for myself, for what I did to Thomas. In the psychologist's room, Thomas was painting a new picture. Dr. Henderson was taking notes, occasionally asking questions. He's doing great, she said after the session. Children are amazingly resilient when they feel supported and loved. Martha brought new documents, the results of an international investigation. The scheme was larger than originally thought. Look, she laid out the charts. Carla's been working with the syndicate for 5 years. Payne's Bank, your company, they were just links in the chain. The company's office was reorganizing. The new director, an experienced crisis manager, was methodically rebuilding the firm's reputation. We'd like you back. He laid out the contract in front of Wendy. Your reputation is impeccable and your experience is invaluable. I need to think about it. She closed the folder. The important thing now is Thomas. Judith Ross called in the evening. I visited Carla in prison. She's changed. For the first time in my life, I see something resembling remorse in her eyes. It's too late for remorse. Wendy looked at Thomas's picture on the table. Some wounds don't heal. The school was having a parent-teacher conference. Miss Parker proudly displayed Thomas's progress. His drawings adorned the classroom walls. He's become the soul of the team, the teacher smiled. Helps the other kids, participates in all the activities. Sarah Mitchell, Jim's mother, approached after the meeting. Wendy, we're having a children's party this weekend. Would Thomas be excited? The house filled with children's laughter. Thomas and his friends played board games while his parents socialized in the garden. You know, Sarah held out a cup of tea to Wendy. You've shown us all what real strength means. Another letter arrived from prison, this time from Ronald. He wrote of remorse, of wanting to redeem himself. I realize I don't deserve forgiveness, he ended, but I want you to know, I regret my cowardice every day. Wendy was working on a new project, advising companies on financial security. Her expertise was in demand. Your story is the best case study ever, said a partner at a large consulting firm. You've shown how to counter corporate fraud. In the evening, Thomas helped arrange books in the new library. His movements were confident, calm. Mom, do you know, he stopped suddenly. Dr. Henderson said that sometimes bad things happen to make us stronger. The first spring flowers were blooming in the garden. Wendy was planting them with Thomas, a new tradition in their new life. Look, the boy pointed to an emerging sprout. It's small, but strong, made its way through the ground. The phone rang. Agent Brown. There's news. The last members of the syndicate have been arrested in Europe. The circle is closed. Martha sent photos from the courtroom. An international tribunal was sentencing the organizers of the scheme. Now it's really over, she wrote. Justice has been served. That evening, Wendy sat in her office looking through the old photos. The story of betrayal and retribution was coming to an end, leaving behind not only scars but lessons. Thomas peeked into the study with a new drawing. This is our family. I know now. It hasn't gotten smaller. It's gotten stronger. 5 years passed unnoticed, like one long dream. Baton Rouge was drenched in spring blooms. The air was soaked with the scent of magnolias. Wendy adjusted Thomas's graduation tie. Her son was graduating from junior high school with honors. "Mom, don't worry so much," 13-year-old Thomas smiled, looking remarkably like herself at that moment. His father's features had almost been erased from his face, leaving only a slight indentation in the line of his eyebrows. The school's assembly hall filled with a hum of voices. Dr. Henderson, who had come to the ceremony at Thomas's invitation, sat next to Wendy. "He's grown into a remarkable young man," the psychologist smiled warmly. "Strong, sensitive, confident." On stage, the headmaster presented awards to the top students. Thomas received a special award for social activism. His project to help disadvantaged children was recognized as the best in the state. After the ceremony, guests gathered in the garden of their house. Martha, who had become almost a member of the family, helped Anna set the tables. The elderly housekeeper refused to retire, saying this family was her true home. "Remember that day?" Martha held out a glass of lemonade to Wendy. "When it all started?" "Every minute." Wendy looked at the playing children. "But now it seems like a story from another life." The morning paper lay on the table. A small notice reported the release of Ronald Pierce. His good behavior and cooperation with the investigation had reduced his sentence. The phone vibrated. A message from his lawyer. "Eric has filed a petition for parole. Hearing in a month." Wendy put the phone away. Over the years, she had learned to accept news of her ex-husband without inner trepidation. His letters to Thomas became less and less frequent until they stopped altogether. Her father, an elderly judge recently retired, entered the house. "Carla is being transferred to a maximum security prison, trying to organize a financial scam right out of prison." "Some people never change," Wendy shook her head. Judith Ross had sent a Christmas card. The older woman had moved to a small town in Florida, trying to start a new life away from the memories of her daughter. The company that had survived the scandal was transformed. New management has made Wendy's story part of the corporate culture, an example of how honesty and integrity triumph over fraud. "We want to offer you a seat on the board," the chairman spoke confidently. "Your experience and reputation are invaluable to us." Wendy agreed, but on her own terms. 3 days a week, no overtime. Time with Thomas remained the top priority. In the evening in the garden, Thomas would show the younger children the constellations. His fascination with astronomy had begun a year ago, and now the telescope held a place of honor in his room. "See Polaris?" His voice sounded confident, teacherly. "It always points the way home. You just have to know where to look." Sarah Mitchell, who had stopped by to pick up her son Jim, lingered to talk. "You know, Wendy, you've changed more than just your life. You've shown all of us what real strength means." In her office, Wendy kept a folder of documents from that case. Sometimes she looked through them, marveling at how much had changed since then. Howard Payne had sent an email. His new bank was growing successfully, specializing in ethical investments. "Your story has taught me a lot," he wrote. "Now every transaction is triple-checked." Alex Donovan, rescued from Carla's scam, became a partner in Wendy's consulting project. They helped companies build defenses against corporate fraud. "The best defense is knowing your enemy," he said in seminars, using their story as a teaching example. Martha developed her detective agency, specializing in corporate investigations. Her methods became a benchmark in the professional community. "Without you, nothing would have gotten done," she told Wendy. "You gave me a chance to make a difference in the world." That evening, as she was putting Thomas to bed, Wendy noticed a new photograph on his desk, a collage of happy moments from their new life. "You know, Mom," her son smiled, catching her eye, "Dr. Henderson says sometimes you have to walk through a storm to see a rainbow." The roses were blooming in the garden. Wendy had planted them the first spring after moving in. Now they had grown into a luxuriant bush, a symbol of a new life taking strong roots. The phone rang. Agent Brown, who had become a family friend. "Remember the syndicate? The last member has been convicted. Case closed permanently." Wendy looked out over the nighttime city from the terrace. Somewhere out there, in a federal prison, Eric was waiting for a parole hearing. Somewhere out there, Carla was planning new schemes, unable to change her nature. But here, in this house, in this garden, new life was blossoming. Thomas had grown strong and wise, not through adversity but in spite of it. "Mom," his voice interrupted his musings, "I finished a history project. Do you want to see it?" The same determination with which Wendy had once begun her fight for justice shone in his eyes. But now it was a luminous force aimed at creation rather than retribution. Life went on, bringing new challenges and new victories. But the main thing remained the same. They were together, stronger than ever. The morning brought new plans, new hopes. Wendy was making breakfast, listening to Thomas getting ready for school, humming some tune. This was their victory, not over betrayal and lies, but over their own fears and doubts. A victory of love over hate, of light over darkness. The story was over, but life went on, opening up new horizons and new possibilities.